Again, my name is Curtis Tilley, and I've been training in Kung Fu, Tai Chi, and Qigong for about 18 years now. And I've worked with quite a variety of populations, mostly with adults. But when I focus with children, the primary thing that works to get them to connect to the exercises is play. When we can really emphasize the playfulness of how we move our bodies and experience our exercises or our breath is generally the best way to get them engaged. And one of the most effective methods of that is to utilize the animal styles that come from traditional Chinese martial arts and the five animal Qigong exercises, which are the tiger, the deer, the bear, the monkey, and the crane. And I found these to be particularly effective because children love to emulate and embody animal experience and to act and to play as if they were animals. In this way, they connect to the movements, and by connecting to the movements and to their breath, they connect to their bodies and they release a lot of their energy in that way. Um, it will take a little bit of time to demonstrate and to share with you these, but before we get into that, maybe I'll pass it back to you to talk a little bit more about the art therapies and the Qigong program or the I Ching program.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you. Um, would it be possible for me to share, Ananda? Let me see if I can. Yep, looks like it's open.
Mm-hmm. So you
Thank,
share your screen. Yeah, it's okay.
okay. So I'm highlighting a recent publication. It's a blog publication that came out through EMDRIA, the EMDR International Association, because we really looked at this in depth in terms of, how E.Qi is a regulation focused model for phase two. So that means even if you're not an EMDR practitioner, you can do a lot of this work as well. And it's just nice and resourcing. And again, we combine Qigong, bilateral art making, that will be my contribution, and then equine engagement. Unfortunately, the horses cannot be here today, so we will have images of them, we will reference them because they are certainly a major part of the work that we do. And so I'm highlighting this because this is not only about regulation, but it's also about embodiment. So as we're working with symbolism in particular, and in this case, animal symbolism, we are embodying those gestures, those expressions, whether it's through movement or art making. And so we do this really gradually and incrementally, and then we have more personal expression or rhythm that comes out of the process. So at first, it may seem like we're emulating, but then it becomes more embodied. But I just wanted to highlight this article because I think it explains it more in depth. Regulation as embodied learning process, then going into the somatic foundations of Qigong, that would be more Sifu Curtis Tilley's contribution. And then bilateral focus and integration without trauma activation and how that looks. And then we also give case illustrations, although these are more adult oriented. We'll be talking about contributions or testimonials from children as we get into this more in depth. So I just want to highlight this article because I think it really explains a lot of what we do. And it even brings in the horses at the end here as external regulators and relational anchors. So there's so many different things that are going on simultaneously and also incrementally. So then I'm going to stop the share here and then I'm going to pass it back to Sifu Curtis.
Thanks, Dr. Warson. The Qigong that I mentioned earlier, I will talk a little bit about, but I'll also demonstrate it. It's about trying, especially for children, to make it as simple as possible. If I'm working with adults, we'll talk about the medicinal benefits and the very small details of proprioception and breath coordination. But when it comes to children, we really just want to keep it simple and not over exaggerate the minutia of it. So I'm going to adjust my table here so that I can speak and demonstrate at the same time. I usually like to begin with swaying, just a gentle rocking back and forth, which allows them to feel their bodies. This is a natural calming mechanism that we use as humans, and children really get into it. We call this in Qigong pouring or swinging. And this allows them to feel their bodies and just kind of wake up. Once we get into that, we begin with tiger claws. The first animal is the tiger, and the kids really like to do this. I say breathe in and breathe out, breathe in and breathe out. And sometimes getting them to breathe out is easier if we can growl. And they just have so much fun with that. But the other thing is you can act like a cat and stretch or just stretch. I'm not focusing too much on specific breath work, but I give them the suggestions to feel. Do you notice how easy it is to breathe in and breathe out? And just paying attention to where the breath naturally falls. The tiger represents power, it represents cat-like action, it represents strength, so we try to talk a little bit about that. The deer antlers, like so, we're going to turn and look around. Now, if it wasn't an adult, I would add steps and I would add weight distribution, but for the kids, we just turn and you get a lot of movement. Breathing in when we come to center, breathing out when we turn. And the deer represents gentleness. We're trying to be soft, we're trying to be calm, and we're trying to recognize that deer are looking around. And I might even tell a story like, let your deer eat some grass, and then look up and look around because just a moment ago, there was a tiger nearby. So I'll include a little bit of storytelling in it as well. The bear is all about satedness, satiety, hunger. So the bear rubs its belly, and it feels good to rub the belly and wobble the head. And we again try to notice, how does the breath feel? Inhale when it's open, exhale when it's closed. And we can rub our belly softly in both directions. The bear rubs its belly. It's about rotating the body and feeling the movement as we create a gentle massage for our bellies. And then beyond that, we would move into the children's generally favorite one, which is playfulness. Monkey is really playful. And the monkey exercise is all about creating this idea of tension and relaxation. And I might not explain that to them. I might just tell the story again. Like when the Monkey King journeyed west, he was able to achieve immortality by eating peaches. So this monkey steals the peaches, reaches into the box, grabs a couple peaches and brings them up, looks around to see if he got in trouble, and then maybe eats them. Set it back down. And kids just love the eating part. That's not part of the Qigong, but it's definitely playful and it really gets them engaged with the exercise. So we would breathe in, creating this kind of tight motion and creating balance, looking around, and then releasing the tension. Because a lot of our stress gets stored up into our shoulders. So by lifting everything tight and squeezing the body, the children start to learn the difference between tension and relaxation. When they're anxious, when they're stressed, they're tight. And now with awareness of that, they can learn to release it. I'm tight. Something is here threatening me, and then it's safe. Feels good. And monkey is probably the best one to really access that. It is again, in is up, look around, out, releasing the tension with the exhale, teaching us that our out breath is a great way to release. And then lastly, the one with gracefulness, the one that also improves balance. And all of them improve proprioception, but the crane is one of the best ones to do it with. It's hard to see, but I'm going to change this camera for my feet. You can see we do this little T stance. Step, T. And it teaches us how to stand on one leg. And once the kids learn that a little bit better and they're able to do the T stance, we will make our T and we'll flap our wings, flying out like a crane. Change the T, in and out. And it's just soft. It's a great way to finish the exercise because if the tiger is power and it's stretching like a cat, and the monkey is playful and it has all this tension, it's nice to finish with something graceful, something soft, something gentle. And we say, time it. Inhale is up, exhale is down. And if they're struggling with their balance or they don't have the comfort to stand on one leg, then they don't have to. And that's the thing about kids is we really just want to make it comfortable and accessible to them. So modifying all of the Qigong exercises is really one of the core points that we're trying to achieve. If they want to stand on both feet and just flap their wings, if they don't really feel like reaching up, maybe they can reach forward. Maybe they can play a little bit. Maybe they don't want to wobble. So it's just knowing who they are and kind of where they're at, taking it one step at a time. When it comes to the 5 animal Qigongs that I demonstrated really quickly, I usually do somewhere between, 3 and 5 repetitions. 5 is kind of my primary goal because then the numbers work together. 5 animals, 5 repetitions, and the kids can really understand that. And we work together on both breathing. Sometimes we count out loud. And sometimes, we don't count at all and we just laugh and play and tell stories about the different animals. And I think they really connect well to that. I would say the 5 animal exercises are also the most effective Qigong for connecting with people that have developmental and learning disabilities as well. And I use that a lot in some of the groups that I work with because across the board, whether we're children or adults, whether we are standard learners or we have learning challenges, just being those different animals and feeling the body is something natural and easy to connect to. Try to not let anybody feel like there's a can or a can't. It's just a matter of what is possible within this moment. Can you feel your body when you stretch up, when you turn side to side, when you rub your belly? Can you imagine a full happy bear? When you squeeze and lift up and release, do you feel the release of tension? When you flap your wings, do you feel graceful and smooth? Body comes first, movement comes first. And when they're more familiar with that, we can start focusing a little bit more on breath. Because when the breath and the body coordinate and they work together, the effect is more powerful, is more effective in general. And the release and the catharsis is really quite profound. Across the board, everybody tells me, I feel better after doing it. And the children, they don't always verbalize it. They don't say, oh, wow, I feel better. They just laugh and they play and they giggle and they'll come back to me and they'll do an animal exercise randomly and just use that as a form of communication, which I am just always pleased by. I'm always tickled to see which animal they prefer. And different personalities will pick different animals for sure. Um, but in a short way, that's when I that's what I believe to be one of the most effective Qigong sets. It's short, it's simple, it's easy to learn, and it's really, really old, which is another fun story to tell, the history of it. But at this point, I will pass the ball back to you, Dr. Worson, and let you take over for the art therapies.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Well, I'm going to bring in some bilateral art making, so we're working with both hands. And a lot of this is considered response work to the Qigong movement. And so this is just another way of embodying the rhythm, the movement in the Qigong form. So I brought in my metal bucket of colored chalk. And so I work outside quite a bit, so I have lots of metal buckets like this. I like the chalk in particular, and I can buy like a huge box of it at a time, and it's very accessible, inexpensive. I like to dip it in water, and then it's a nice smooth kind of feel to it when I dip it in water. And then I work on some large scale boards. I'm going to bring in one of my boards, and it represents a bear movement that I did beforehand. So you can get a sense of what is she talking about? What kind of bilateral art making? How do you integrate this? So let me grab the board. So this is my portable drawing board. So you can see the height of it here. It's about 3 feet tall. And it's a blackboard. And on the other side, it's a whiteboard. But I like the blackboard myself because I can use the chalk dipped in water. And it's just a super nice board, very lightweight and portable. And we use these a lot. We use these outside. We use these indoors in my office. And they're just lovely and they last for a long time. Now, I didn't cut these. I bought these pre-bought. So in the US, if I go to a hardware store, you can find these boards already pre-cut. They may be different sizes in different places, but they're very versatile. If I don't want to use either side, whiteboard or blackboard, I can take really nice paper. I like mulberry paper myself. I like handmade paper, and I get a roll of that, or even a roll of calligraphy paper, and just wrap it around the board and clip it on, and then I can use ink. So I'll show some examples of that later on. But I want to show you like some of my bear movement here. And so what that looked like was thinking about the Qigong movement. And then Curtis, if I'm not doing this 100%, please jump in there. And then taking that to a bilateral movement here on the board. So what I'd like for you to do, and there's no right and wrong, it's just kind of like taking that rhythm from each form and just bringing it into your surface, sometimes layering them so you don't have to have 5 separate images, but you can layer the drawings, the marks on one board or one piece of paper. So you probably have paper, and that's perfectly fine. I just want to show this because it's completely removable, so I can clean this off every time. So with your paper and your drawing materials, and you can even just have pens, you don't have to have anything, of color, or you can have pencils, whatever is accessible. And take out a piece of paper. It could be even a little small piece of paper today, and that's perfectly fine. And what I'd like for you to do is to explore the 5 movements. So Curtis, if you could be so kind to repeat those 5 movements, and then
Absolutely.
people can explore some of that movement.
Well, with the tiger again, it's really an up and a down, bilateral lines that kind of go up and down the midline. So you might just have a motion that does this. And with the deer, we're getting a little bit more of a turning. So maybe you're kind of rolling around a circle, keeping the hands like this. Notice that the hands being on opposite sides of the circle, rotating together, whereas our bear, our hands are together, creating the full circle. So we might do this or this. And when we're working again with our children, We're not teaching as much about the details. We're working a little bit more about just let it happen, let it be natural. With the monkey is also an up and down, but at the top, there's a little bit of left and right, and then we come back down the middle. So it almost looks like our letter T, up, a little bit of flow back and forth, and then back down the middle. And then lastly, our crane exercise is kind of going up the circle and down the circle. So from bottom point to top point. And now we've explored all of these shapes in that, you could do circles at least 3 different ways. The deer has these rotating sides. The bear follows the circle. The crane goes from top to bottom. And then we also have a nice midline, which is just up and then up and down with a little bit of flow. Most of the Qigong exercises have these beautiful shapes and these fluidities to them. Um, but more than anything, I try to encourage people just to notice how naturally movement occurs. What comes out doesn't have to be right or wrong, just what comes out. And then we can always think about that later. It's not a mental exercise, it's a feeling exercise. Let your body express itself through movement.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to give you some time to explore that, just some of those gestures, movement, with whatever materials you have, whether it's pens, pencils, larger pieces of chalk, crayon, whatever you have available, even paintbrushes if you have those. Sometimes I do this just with brushes dipped in water on a concrete or on a board. So it's just about the movement, it's about the sensation. So we'll just spend a few minutes exploring that if you haven't done so already.
And while you do, maybe I'll just talk a little bit about something I noticed while Dr. Warson was presenting. And she said, if you notice I'm doing this wrong, jump on in. And that's exactly what kids do. That's exactly what everybody does. And
Mm-hmm.
it's really important to notice that right off the bat, we all feel a little awkward or uncomfortable trying something new. And that's that's the most important part as in my case as a teacher, to catch them and say, whatever you do is all right. Here's a circle. Make a circle. How does that feel? Well, I feel kind of awkward. That's okay. Do it again. Do it again. Do it again. Just keep doing it until it doesn't feel uncomfortable anymore. Most of Qigong exercise is natural. Being uncomfortable is natural. So from the beginning to the end of the entire experience, it's all about just accepting ourselves in our natural state. I'm not sure. I'm uncertain. The more I practice, the better I get. And that's where children really develop a state of self-confidence. And that's what I've noticed the most about these kinds of exercises. As kids become more confident when they're given the freedom to explore uncomfortable, to explore uncertain, and to move through it. Literally move through it. It starts off slow, and then it becomes familiar, and then it becomes fun. And then we can kind of look back and think about it if we want.
Thank you. So just another minute or so to come to a good stopping place. It might be fun just to explore all 5 and then go back into something that, was really pleasurable or, connected to you. For me, it was the bear movement today. I enjoyed doing the bear movement this morning to kind of warm up. And I have a little PowerPoint. That kind of, will give some illustrations and different ways of working and highlighting this symbolic form of bilateral art making too. So I'm going to go back to the share. Okay. We're bringing in the horses now. And so the horse in this, we have a mule and a horse. So in the foreground there, that's red, and in the background, the black horse with the white brand on its neck. That's previously a wild Mustang. So we have a lot of those in Colorado. And we adopted this Mustang, oh, I'd say about now 7 years ago. And her name is Roxanne. And then again, red is a mule. So a mule is half horse and half donkey. And they're my co-regulators. They're helping me out. So they're just very curious and getting into the process. Roxanne, the Mustang in the background, she is so funny because if you put a cone on the ground, so inverted, there's a point, she will pick it up and she will draw circular, kind of like the bear motion. She makes circular images in the sand with cones. So it's really interesting to see animals making marks like that intentionally. And she's one of them. Not all of them do it, but she certainly does. So she is very interested. Whenever I bring, you see my portable board there, and I have some paper tape on the whiteboard side. She's very interested in the mark making that I'm doing. I'm doing figure 8 here. And that's just a really lovely sensation as well. And, again, bilateral movement is just using both sides, both hands. It's just a bilateral type movement. Some people, like today, I'm working with a person who's only unilateral, but I incorporate both sides of the body as we do art making. So it doesn't always have to be just both hands. You can also bring in both sides of the body, incorporating the midline, and then also getting that hemispheric feeling integration through sway and other motion as well. And this supports neural integration. So a lot of clients that we work with, after they do Qigong and also bilateral art making afterwards, note that they feel grounded, they feel centered, there's a change in their breath, there's a shift and a positive direction. So not every single time, but I say the majority of the time, people say like, oh wow, I really feel my feet on the ground. I feel grounded, connected. And so it also, and this is just for your knowledge here. I don't always share this with my clients, but there's a lot of structural benefits. So bilateral movement in art making engages multiple parts of the brain. So the motor cortex, which controls voluntary muscle movement, sensory cortex, and I really like to play with that. I bring in rocks, feathers, sticks, all kinds of things, and have people put that in their hand so they can get that extra sensory information. So in this image here, I'm using feathers. I collect feathers all the time, and then I'm just dipping them in some kind of pigment, ink, and then using that in a very similar way that you may be using drawing materials. It also engages the occipital lobe, so processes visual stimuli relevant to visual tracking. So in essence, if you're an EMDR person, you're getting the EM or the eye movement in this process as well. And then the parietal cortex involves spatial awareness and coordination. So this is so important, this type of proprioception, because you're integrating the regions through bilateral movement, which strengthens neural connections and overall brain function. So I'm looking at proprioception, how people move and how that changes over time and what it's like on the ground, on the horse, etc. And a lot of times that's how I measure change is through proprioception. How are they moving today versus, a month ago? So that's a really good way for how I track it. And then there's some other structural benefits, namely vestibular stimulation, because certain types of bilateral movement, and so this is just movement in general, rocking, swinging, or other rhythmic movements can provide vestibular input, which is a sensory system responsible for balance, proprioception, spatial orientation. But, everyone's like, oh my goodness, this is so much physical regulation. Well, this also helps with emotional regulation to improve the body's awareness of its position in space, also is really key to regulating emotion, and eventually that leads to psychological regulation. It's like a continuum: physical, emotional, psychological. And then you kind of work back and forth, up and down, however direction you choose to on that continuum of regulation. And I will note that I like to emphasize the vestibular stimulation, because a lot of people in my practice and that I've been working with since the pandemic, especially the quarantine, have struggled with vestibular dizziness, challenges along those lines, balance, have been a little challenging, partly because of a dysregulated autonomic nervous system. So the nervous system has been off for some people and resulting in some of these vestibular issues. So just highlighting that. So here's some art making images. When Curtis and I wrote our first edition of E.Qi, because we're writing the second one right now, we looked at it as essentially 3 different phases. So this is an overlap with some of the work that I've done with my father, who's in this clip, and then also some of the work that I've been doing for, I don't know how many years, 6 years with Curtis. And we're looking at simultaneous, continuous, and overlapping movement. So these are like circular forms, figure 8 forms, things that feel continuous at times, nice flow to them. And this is, kind of a beginning stage. So if I was working with a child, this is exactly where I start, is this simultaneous, continuous overlapping. So that was included in the 5 animal forms. A lot of that, the gesture movement, that's there. That's just the foundation of a lot of the bilateral movement Qigong work that we do. I want to highlight the person on the far right who did, this is primarily figure 8, back and forth, infinity, if you want to call it that, with, you can see up and down midline and a little T reference there, much like the monkey gesture. And she just brought that in intuitively. And she's a very dear friend of mine who just does wonderful bilateral art making with horses in nature. So really wanted to highlight her art. This is just my dad and I working together. This is kind of like what we're doing today with the symbolic references. So the 5 animal movements. This is also a form of meditation. So it's meditative movement. It's a little different from like phase 1, where we're kind of like repeating gestures. Goes to a different level. And these are 3 different people who I've worked with that illustrate this well. This person is laying on the ground, right? And she's just doing her gestures. So this is kind of like that T shape with the monkey right there. But this is in response to working with horses. So that's just what came out for her. This is someone who's in nature in the country of Ireland. The other person was in New Mexico, which is a state in the United States. But this is in Ireland, out in the countryside. And so she's responding to nature with bilateral movement.
It was very inspiring with its movement.
So hers is more tree oriented versus animal. First one was more animal. The last one over here is a poet who's in New Mexico as well. And this is in response to Qigong with a herd of horses, about 50 of them, and we were on the fence. So that means we were not in with them directly. Sometimes we are, but with 50 horses, that would be a lot. So this was her response. And this is going into more symbolic and then even cognitive, because she brings in some really wonderful references to nature and her whole experience. So it's not just the gesture, she's starting to do more meaning making with her experience. So I'll show a little clip of this. It's almost inaudible, but I just want you to see her gestures.
Triangle, the Qigong, and then I brought the horse poop in there too. Because I don't know, that struck me for some reason, just the flying that like kind of thing. And then yesterday I walked the labyrinth, so it's hard to draw a labyrinth freehand, so I just drew the stones. And the brown horse there with us. I can still see the moon in the sky, so I brought that in, and then the cliff there. And these are all the little.
So she's almost telling a story, right? Of her experience doing Qigong with the horses, a big herd, connecting with nature, seeing a labyrinth in her mind, saying, I'm going to do something different with that image, but it's like a labyrinth. So that was the symbolism that she brought into it. And then this is more advanced work. This is something that I've been exploring in some of my trainings, but this is more sophisticated contralateral movement and cross midline action. And these are 3 people who are using some earth-based chalk pastel that I'd made previously and bringing in some of that movement. I'll just play the middle one there. So we have horses in the background, you can kind of see them. So she'd already done a lot of bilateral movement, and now she's bringing in something more contralateral. And then at one point she drops the chalk and she starts just using her hands. Right there. And there she's getting into her own flow, her own rhythm. And this is in response to working with the horses. If you don't have horses, that's fine. I mean, I work with them, and sometimes I don't have them there. I just wanted to highlight this slide of working directly with horses. This is our E.Qi solstice and equinox gatherings. And so sometimes we bring in felted stone, which is the top left there, and we're bringing in a lot of the movement while felting a stone. So that's fleece around a stone and just agitating it with water, going back and forth. And then it becomes a calming stone. These are just illustrations of, on the right-hand side, upper right, of people working with the portable boards I just showed you in response to their Qigong movement. And then lower is directly with the horses. So the horses are usually in the arena with us, or we're actually on them and doing the work, and then doing response artwork afterwards. So there's so many different things that you can do. This is, sometimes I just bring it to the earth, bring in sticks and bring in bilateral movement, and we just do it directly in the earth, or we just use, the one on the far right is actually tree sap that I used and crushed up and started painting with my hands on mulberry paper. So bringing in that earth aspect again. And then this is sort of a final thought, just bringing it all together, that a lot of the work that Sifu Curtis, Tilly, and I do together is about the physical regulation, the breath work, grounding exercises, Qigong work, progressive muscle relaxation, for instance, helps calm the body's trauma response. These are just examples. Emotional regulation. This is the mindfulness, the self-compassion, safe relationships, feeling internally safe in our body is really important. That builds capacity without people having panic attack sensations, anxious responses, or even dissociating experiences. And then psychological regulation. So that's where we bring in more of a cognitive frame, and we might bring in visual journaling, dialoguing with the images. And this supports meaning making narratives, and it can create a coherent trauma narrative for some people. And here's the outcome: it creates a stimulus response cycle that restores balance. So this is what we're looking at when I work with anyone, but especially children and adolescents. I go along this continuum, so I'm not just starting in the cognitive. I'm going a lot of physical regulation to get there. So I'm gonna get my little energy ball and pass it back to. There you go.
Well, thank you. That's really nice. I liked the images. I wanted to maybe bring in a couple of experiences that I've had as an instructor. I've had a school with large groups of children, and I taught people at one at a time. And sometimes one of the hardest things for kids to do, and they're far more expressive than the adolescents are about this, but I think they experience it both ways, is show up. Sometimes just walking in the door. They will sometimes literally be kicking and screaming. Parents are dragging them into the school or bringing them, and they say, "Here." And I'm like, "Okay." And then I'll just sit down with them and just sit. Do you have anything you want to say? How are you feeling? What have you done today? And instead of jumping right into the exercise or the breathing or the teaching, we just take a moment to create space. Once that space is created, then we can start kind of moving. And just to use the five animal exercises, it could be done sitting, it could be done inaccurately, so to speak. That's not a right or a wrong. But what I've noticed is that moving the body turns whatever mental or emotional process or energy, if you will, into something that just feels a little bit better, something that's a little bit more positive, forward moving. And by the end of a 30-minute, sometimes a 60-minute experience, they're almost like maybe 90% of the time feeling significantly better. And the parents will say something to me like, wow, they're more respectful, they're more calm, they're more willing to listen, they're more self-confident, they're not throwing a fit anymore. And I say, it's about transmuting the energy. That there's an uncertainty, there's a discomfort at first, and there's also the sense of obligation that they have to do this thing, they don't want to do this thing. And that's my experience as a martial arts teacher. And they come in and then, well, they move. It's the movement that is the catharsis. It's the transformation of their mental and emotional energies into physical action before we even start talking about breath. With adolescents, it's not as expressive. It's usually a little bit more withdrawn, like, they don't want to move. They don't want to talk. They don't want to do anything. They're just like pouting sometimes. And if I can get them to even just start lifting their shoulders or just kind of swaying back and forth, then that movement starts to snowball into more movement. And then they can start to feel like, oh, yeah, I can move. And then that becomes that same example of transmuting energy from stillness to action, or from too much action to more stillness. And that's really what Tai Chi is all about, is alternating between action and inaction, stillness and motion. And we want to find that balance, that harmony. And that's the middle point that we generally seek. So without having too many specific examples, case studies, I can just say across the board, I've had many, many examples where children, adolescents, adults, people of all learning capabilities have demonstrated to me and in my own personal experience that movement, mindfulness, intentful movement transforms almost all forms of emotional and mental energy into something that feels a little bit better, something that feels a little bit more grounded. This is why it's so effective. And then folks like Dr. Warson bring in their studies and understanding of how, bilateral movement affects the neurological experience of ourselves. And she really provides a lot of insight in how that can then be created expressfully into art. And then how co-regulators like the horses can really improve the environment and change the way we experience that. Um, so there's so much to say and there's so much to experience, and none of it is going to really be truly understood until we do it ourselves. And that's why it's a form of kung fu. We have to put time and effort into it. It doesn't usually for me happen in one session. Many sessions where people become less uncertain, more familiar, less uncomfortable, more confident. That's the practice of it. That's the repetition of it. And that's why the movements are over and over and over and over again, because that's the release of it as well. With so much to talk about, maybe we can open it up to see if anybody on the board here has any questions about it so we can direct our future conversation more specifically to things that you might be curious about.
Okay, thank you so much for your expertise, guidance, and lecture, Curtis and Elizabeth. And yes, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to both of you. And thank you, Elizabeth, for sharing your profound insights into how expressive arts and the inquiry-assisted therapy can accompany children through their maybe darkness moments, and your stories of grace and our child with brain injury, and our teenagers who found peace in moment. These are not just the clinic examples. They are testaments to the power of the presence. And also thank you, Curtis, for the guidance and the wisdom of Qigong and Breath. Your reminder that regulation begins the body, not the mind, is one we carry with us. We are truly honored to have you both here tonight. Now, before we move further, we have some time for the questions. If anyone have the questions, you can maybe type in the chat box or just mute your microphone and just ask if anyone have. I just prepared 2 questions. Maybe I can just ask for the question 1. Maybe E.Qi practice emphasize nervous system regulation through the Qigong and bilateral movement. In children and adolescents, their nervous system is still developing. And the different age group may respond differently to regulatory approaches. How do you adjust the intensity, pacing, and the delivery of this practice to accommodate different developmental stages and the individual neurodivergency, such as autism, ADHD, and trauma history? Yeah,
Well, maybe
Yeah,
maybe I
thank
can
you.
start off and reiterate a little bit of where I left off just a moment ago, but in greater depth. Young children, I found, especially under the age of 9 or 10, are really mirrors to my energy. So if they come in and they're really elevated, then my job, I generally try to be more calm to balance that out and hold a safe space for them. With adolescents and they're really withdrawn, I try to present a safe excitement and enthusiasm, and then they will pick up on that. And by representing the balance of whatever they're bringing to me today, and I try to reflect that in its opposite, but also in a very positive and safe way, they generally meet me somewhere in the middle, which is where we're trying to go with it, especially with folks who have various learning capabilities, whether they're along the autistic spectrum or they have a variety of other learning challenges. Most of my success has come from just seeing them as they are and looking at them, answering their questions, talking to them, holding space for them, and letting them feel like there isn't something that we're supposed to do. There isn't something that we have to achieve, but accepting them in the moment as they are shows them that they can accept themselves in the moment as they are. And that is what kind of breaks down the barrier for learning. And there's no right or wrong to it. It's just a matter of let's be right here, right now, as we are. And then the movements can be whatever they are. We just start moving. And there's a little bit of playfulness involved along the spectrum of children and adolescents and all learning abilities. The play, the enjoyment, the enthusiasm. That's what I think is the most effective method of meeting them and regulating to that centeredness.
Hmm. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your answer. Yeah. I think it just in the moment and they can feel it and just have this healing or have this powerful from maybe their feeling also regulating for them. So, Elizabeth, you want to speak something?
Um, well, that's why I like our phased approach. That's how I look at it because we're doing some real, it's just becoming
Really?
more sophisticated as they go along. And so I may start like real basic, like follow me in these gestures.
Mm-hmm.
And then let's bring it to the art making and see what happens. And then as we go along, it gets a little more sophisticated. The proprioception changes. And that's how I know, that's when I look at the proprioception, that's how I know they're internalizing some of this. That's how I know there's shifts and changes. And then I also notice significant changes, especially with some of my clients who are on the autism spectrum. So when they're mounted on a horse, there's a lot of positive shifts, things that happen. So sometimes their proprioception is different on a horse. Sometimes it's improved. Sometimes their vocalizations are different, or they're more able to express things differently or even expand on things more so when they're on the back of a horse. And then that carries over to their art making as well. It shifts and changes. So I see a lot of developmental changes in all the work we do because it's a whole brain experience. And then you're bringing in so many other aspects to it, from co-regulation to attunement, all kinds of things that you really see these lovely shifts and changes over time. Much better than a handout. That's just a cognitive reference there.
Thank you. Thank you so much for
Hmm.
your answer. Yeah. Mhm. And uh, so I just have another question. Maybe if someone else who have the question, maybe you can type there. And I just ask the question too. The talk um, mentioned horses as nature co-regulators that help children build a sense of safety. In family systems, a child's emotions dysregulation is often connected to the caregivers' states. Does the E.Qi model involve the parent-child joint participants or the family level interventions? And how do you help families transfer the regulatory capacity into the daily life? Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Well, when I do, this is the
Mhm.
only way I do family therapy is with the horses because I have a whole team working with me of horses, and they give me such wonderful feedback in terms of the dynamics of the family. So that's even outside of the I Ching model. That's looking at just equine therapy in general. I really enjoy having the feedback because they're very truthful. They're responding to what's being brought into that space. And so I really look at their behaviors and their interactions. And so when you bring in the regulation of the E.Qi from the movement to the art making, it just adds to that experience even more so. And so I like doing family systems that way because, you know, you're not just getting people who are just repeating beliefs or myths or all kinds of things. It's like, this is like really in the moment what's going on. So sometimes I have horses or mules that go into protection mode around the child, and we can explore that when we're like, you know, that's what the horses or the mules or the donkeys are reflecting back. That's what's here and now in the present moment. So let's look at that interaction right there. Sometimes it's very, very telling.
Thank you. Thank you for your answer. And yes, I think it's it's just profound. And also I have the friend just asked me for maybe it's animals company for the emotional company therapy, and how the therapeutic technique for that. I think, oh, it's a horse. I just think about it as a horse company for the maybe children's regulation or something. It's very naturally, and also it's beautiful to connect with animals. Yes, it's a beautiful moment to share it together.
Yeah, it is. Lots of surprises in this session.
Yes. I didn't say, so maybe there's no questions for our participants. So I just conclusion for this session, and thank you again, Elizabeth and Curtis, for those rich responses. For those of you who feel the deeper core of explore this work, whether you are a therapist, educator, social workers, and parents, or simply someone who wants to work beside children with more presence and tools, we invite you to go deeper. And also, I just recommended you to join us for E.Qi Foundation, the Clinic Application Certification course this September. We start with September 10th, and we have the 4 sessions, maybe 30 hours. Yes, also we have the plus 20 hours for supervised practice. Yes, this is our systematically framework with integrative healing, and also practical. There are also questions.
It's
Thank
true.
you all.
Kung Fu Panda was a very good movie, and they have so many good references. All the animals are there too.
Yeah, Kung Fu is very, very famous, yes, movie in China. Yeah, also in the global. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, teachers. Thank you, owner. Yeah. Also, I just continue my introduction for our E.Qi Foundation and the clinical application. Yes, works. It's also a practical tool for emotional regulation, trauma support, and resilience building, and also a direct mentorship from the founders, Dr. Elizabeth Wilson and Curtis Tley, and the a supportive global network and practitioner. We also have some therapists from Australia and also another countries. Tonight's session have been recorded. the replay will with the Chinese subtitle and will be sent to all registered participants. And for more information about certification course, please check your email and also contact us at the IAETDAA@gmail.com. Also the 163.com, yeah, for Chinese participants. And yeah, and now as we close tonight's gathering, I would like to offer in a simple blessing. May you carry with you the breath of the horse, the stillness of the earth, and the courage to stay with your heart. May you remember that healing is not about fixing, but about being truly present. And may you, in your own way, continue accompanying the children and young people in your life with patient companionship and quiet stress. Thank you once again, Elizabeth and Curtis, for your wisdom and hearts. Thank you to all of you for your presence tonight. The door is open, the path continues. We hope to work with you further. Yeah, thank you.